to NVL Travel Documentary. When you think of California, you picture sunshine, palm trees, and movie stars. But what if we told you there's another side?
Give me my boy back!
In this episode of NVL Travel Documentary, we dive into the heart of a hidden crisis: homelessness and addiction in one of the world's richest places. With nearly half of the entire U.S. homeless population living in California, the contrast is staggering. This isn't just a Facts About Countries video, it's a raw, human country documentary that takes you beyond the beaches and into the forgotten corners of the Golden State. What's really happening behind the glamour of Los Angeles and San Francisco? Stick with us, the truth might surprise you.
He asked me if I was selling my bike.
Number 1. The hidden side of California's golden image. California, the Golden State, famous for its sunshine, palm trees, and tech millionaires. But here's the part you won't find on a postcard. Nearly half of all homeless people in the United States live right here in California. As of the year 2024, the federal government counted approximately 653,000 people experiencing homelessness across the country. California alone accounts for more than 180,000 of them. That's around 49%, even though the state makes up just 12% of the U.S. population. The numbers are staggering. To give you some perspective, New York, which ranks second, has just over 103,000 homeless individuals. That's almost 80,000 fewer than California. And unlike in colder states where more people seek out shelters, nearly 70% of California's homeless population lives without any roof at all, sleeping in parks, under bridges, or on the sidewalks of major cities. So while California still shines in movies and magazines, the contrast on the ground is jarring. It's a place where luxury high-rises tower over tent cities, and where five-star restaurants stand just blocks from makeshift soup kitchens. The sunshine is real, but so is the shadow it casts. Number 2. Los Angeles, the ground zero of the crisis. Let's zoom in on Los Angeles, the epicenter of California's homelessness crisis. In the year 2024, the city counted approximately 75,100 people without a permanent home. That's nearly half of the entire homeless population in California, all concentrated in just one county. Nowhere is this crisis more visible than in Skid Row, a 50-block stretch in downtown Lilly, where around 4,400 people live in tents, under tarps, or in makeshift shelters. The area is dense, chaotic, and for many, it's the only place left to go. The city has made some efforts to turn the tide. One of the biggest programs, called Inside Safe, was launched to move people from the streets into hotels and temporary housing. Since 2022, it has helped about 2,500 individuals find shelter. That sounds promising, and it is a step forward, but it still leaves more than 55,000 people sleeping rough across the city. And the consequences go far beyond what we see on the surface. In the year 2023 alone, over 1,200 homeless individuals in Los Angeles lost their lives. Many of these deaths were due to drug overdoses, hypothermia, or even hit-and-run accidents. Tragedies that highlight just how dangerous it is to live without stable shelter. Despite billions of dollars poured into city and state programs, Los Angeles feels like a ship taking on water faster than it can be bailed out. For every person housed, many more fall through the cracks, caught in a storm of rising rents, untreated mental illness, and addiction. But here's the thing, Behind each number is a real person, someone's mother, father, sister, or friend. The story of homelessness in LA isn't just about policy failure. It's about lives lost and chances missed. And as we walk through these streets, one truth becomes painfully clear. This isn't just a housing issue, it's a human one. Number 3, San Francisco, between tech and tents. Now let's head north to San Francisco, a city of sharp contrasts, where towering tech offices sit just steps away from rows of tents and open drug use. As of the year 2024, San Francisco reported a total of 7,754 people experiencing homelessness. And while that number may seem smaller compared to Los Angeles, the intensity of the crisis here is just as real and just as heartbreaking. The Tenderloin district stands at the center of it all. It's a dense, gritty neighborhood where tents line sidewalks and drug activity happens in plain sight. It has become a symbol of the city's struggle, not just with homelessness, but with mental health, addiction, and public safety. But there has been some progress. Since the year 2019, the percentage of homeless individuals who are sheltered in San Francisco has gone up, from 36% to 48% by 2024. That shift is thanks in large part to a more than 60% increase in shelter bed capacity since 2018. The city has invested in more indoor spaces, transitional housing, and short-term programs, and it's showing some results. Still, the ripple effects are impossible to ignore. Downtown San Francisco has seen a sharp rise in commercial vacancies, with 34% of office spaces now sitting empty. Many businesses cite visible homelessness, safety concerns, and declining foot traffic as key reasons for pulling out. What was once a bustling hub is now struggling to hold on to its economic heartbeat. So, while the city is making gains in sheltering more people, the challenges are far from over. San Francisco's homelessness crisis isn't just playing out on sidewalks, it's reshaping the very core of the city, from the streets to the skyline. And that's why this story matters. Because when a city as wealthy and innovative as San Francisco struggles this deeply, it forces us to ask, what will it take to truly turn things around? Number 4, San Diego Beach, tiny homes, and a health emergency. Now let's head down the coast to San Diego, a city known for its beaches, sunshine, and surf culture. But just beyond the postcard views, San Diego is facing a growing crisis of its own. By the year 2024, the city reported around 6,500 people experiencing homelessness. What's especially alarming is that the number of unsheltered individuals, those sleeping on sidewalks, in parks, or along riverbeds, has jumped by 26% since the year 2020. In response, the city has tried to act fast. One of the more visible efforts was the addition of 150 tiny homes near Balboa Park. These small prefab shelters are meant to be quick, cost-efficient solutions that give people a safe, clean place to stay. And while they're far from permanent housing, they offer something critical, a door that locks and a bit of dignity. But San Diego's crisis isn't just about shelter. In the year 2024, the city was hit by a hepatitis A outbreak, a serious public health threat that was traced back to unsanitary conditions in homeless encampments. At least 20 people were infected, highlighting just how closely homelessness is tied to community health and safety. So while progress is happening, and the city is clearly trying, the urgency is growing. More people are on the streets, and the stakes are higher than ever. San Diego's challenge isn't just finding space to house people, it's figuring out how to do it quickly, humanely, and in a way that protects both the individuals in need and the city as a whole. Because at the end of the day, homelessness doesn't just affect those living outside, it touches everyone around them. Number 5, Sacramento, city, growing crisis. Sacramento, California's capital city. It may not have the scale of Los Angeles or the tech power of San Francisco, but when it comes to homelessness, Sacramento is facing a crisis that's growing fast and hitting hard. Between the year 2019 and 2022, the number of people experiencing homelessness in Sacramento surged by 52%. By the year 2023, the total reached 5,000 individuals, a massive increase for a mid-sized city. In response, local officials turned to a rapid solution: tiny homes. In the year 2023, the city built 350 of these compact shelters, which provided housing for around 1,000 people. It's a step in the right direction, fast to build, cheaper than traditional housing, and crucially, it gets people off the streets and into safe, secure spaces. But the challenge is evolving. In 2024, Sacramento saw a sharp rise in what's called vehicular homelessness, people living in their cars, vans, or RVs. It's a quieter form of homelessness, often hidden in parking lots or side streets, but it's no less real. Many of these folks are families, seniors, or workers who simply can't afford rent despite having income. This shift highlights a growing trend not just in Sacramento but across the state. Even with a job, housing can be out of reach. And when shelter beds or tiny homes fill up, a car becomes the last line of defense before the streets. Number 6. Fresno, when low cost is... Finally, let's head to Fresno, a city in California's Central Valley, where life is quieter and the cost of living is lower. But don't let the affordable housing fool you. Fresno is facing a homelessness crisis of its own, and it's growing fast. Since the year 2019, the number of people experiencing homelessness in Fresno has jumped by a staggering 80%. By 2024, the city counted around 3,000 people without stable housing. That's a major surge for a region often seen as more affordable than coastal cities like Los Angeles or San Francisco. So what's behind this spike? Well, part of the answer lies in Fresno's lower cost of living. As rents soared across California, many people struggling to keep a roof over their heads began relocating to places like Fresno, hoping to catch a break. But what they found instead was a city unprepared for the influx. Fresno simply doesn't have the same resources or support systems as larger cities. There are fewer shelter beds, fewer mental health services, and limited outreach programs. So while housing may be cheaper, there's not enough of it, and there's not enough help for those who fall through the cracks. This is a powerful reminder that affordability alone isn't a safety net. Without proper support, things like emergency shelter, mental health care, addiction treatment, and job assistance, even a low-rent city can become a pressure cooker. Fresno's rise in homelessness is a warning sign. It shows that the crisis isn't just a big city problem. It's spreading into smaller communities, into rural counties, and into places that thought they might be immune. And if we don't act with urgency and compassion, it won't stop here. Number 7. Root causes: why California is struggling. So how did California end up in this crisis? It's not one single cause. It's a storm of problems, all colliding at once. Let's break it down. First up, the cost of housing. It's sky high. In the year 2024, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco hit $3,200 per month. In Los Angeles, it was close behind at $2,800. And when it comes to buying a home, it's just as extreme. The average home price in California reached $850,000, more than double the national average of $412,000. Now imagine trying to afford that on minimum wage. At $19 an hour, that's about $39,500 a year. After taxes, rent alone can eat up more than 60% of your take-home pay. No wonder over 50% of renters in the state that spend over 30% of their income on rent. Even worse, 1 in 4 are handing over half their paycheck just to keep a roof over their heads. But it's not just about price, it's also about supply. According to a 2023 report from McKinsey, California is short about 2.5 million homes. From the year 2015 to 2023, Los Angeles only built around 22,000 affordable units. But the city needed 180,000. San Francisco approved just 4,300 new units in 2023, less than half its target of 10,000. And across the entire state, only 15% of land is zoned for apartments or multifamily housing. That means even when cities want to build, the rules make it nearly impossible. Then there's the issue of mental health and addiction. Between 24 and 27% of people experiencing homelessness in California suffer from severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Over half have a history of substance use. Yet only 14% of the state's psychiatric beds serve people without insurance. In 2023 alone, more than 1,500 homeless individuals died from drug overdoses, most involving methamphetamine or fentanyl. Add in the aftermath of COVID. During the pandemic, $5.2 billion in rent relief helped nearly 600,000 households stay housed. But when that funding ended in 2022, evictions surged, especially in Los Angeles, where filings jumped 40% in 2023 to more than 78,000 cases. And finally, while most homeless individuals, about 90%, are longtime Californians, a small percentage do come from other states like Arizona or Nevada, often drawn by California's warm weather and more accessible healthcare. Put all of this together, and you've got a system pushed to its breaking point where one missed paycheck, one medical emergency, or one lost job can be all it takes to end up on the street. Number 8. Billions spent, but are we solving anything? Since the year 2018, the state has poured more than $37 billion into programs aimed at reducing homelessness. That's a massive investment. But where has all that money gone? One of the biggest initiatives is Project Homekey, launched during the pandemic. The idea? Take old motels, empty office buildings, even strip malls, and turn them into housing. By the year 2024, the program had purchased 225 properties, creating around 15,000 housing units across the state. Then there was emergency rent, a $2 billion rolled out during COVID, helping about 300,000 households stay in their homes when they were on the brink of eviction. It was temporary, but it kept thousands of families off the streets at a critical moment. On the ground, California is also experimenting with tiny homes, 8 by 10 foot prefab shelters that cost about $225,000 each to build. They go up fast and cost far less than traditional affordable housing. It's not luxury living, but for someone coming from a sidewalk, it's a safer place to sleep. The state has also expanded its shelter capacity, now offering about 53,000 beds, a 15% increase since 2019. Still, that's not enough. California is short by at least 100,000 beds, and shelters remain overwhelmed. The core philosophy behind most of these efforts is something called housing first. Get people into homes first, then work on mental health, addiction, or job support afterward. It's backed by $12 billion from Medical California's public health system, which now ties housing to healthcare. Studies show 70% of people placed through Housing First stayed housed after 2 years. But here's where the debate kicks in. Only about 30% of those people actually receive treatment for addiction or mental illness. Critics argue that without mandatory services, the root causes go unaddressed. And then there's the more controversial approach, sweeping encampments. In 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that cities can penalize sleeping in public. Since 2021, California has cleared around 11,000 camps and hauled away over 248,000 cubic yards of trash. Supporters say it's about clean and safe streets. Opponents say it's just cosmetic, moving tents, not solving the problem. So yes, California is spending big, but the question remains, is it spending smart? Number 9. What might actually work? Real solutions. So with billions already spent, and a crisis still growing, what could actually work? Let's talk about real, practical solutions, ones that go beyond quick fixes and dig into the roots. First, California needs to build a lot more affordable housing, and fast. One model worth studying is Finland. Since the 1980s, they've reduced homelessness by 70% by building around 60,000 low-cost homes for a population of 5.5 million. Now, imagine applying that to California. The state could set a bold but realistic goal by the year 2030. But to make that happen, the state has to cut through red tape. In Finland, permits take 6 months. In California, it's often 18. Speed matters when people are sleeping outside. Second, housing alone isn't enough. We need to pair it with support. That means combining shelter with treatment for mental illness and addiction. It's what experts call housing plus treatment. Utah tried this back in 2015 with 200 chronically homeless individuals. They gave them homes and care, and 91% stayed halved after 2 years. Even better, it cut public costs in half, from $20,000 per person down to $8,800. California could absolutely scale that up. Third, focus on prevention. Once someone ends up on the streets, it's much harder to help them. Programs like Housing for Health in Los Angeles use data to spot people at risk of eviction before they fall. During COVID, emergency rent relief saved 600,000 households from losing their homes. Why not keep that going? Especially when over 1.2 million Californians spend more than half their income just on rent. Fourth, streamline the system. Administrative costs are eating up 20% of program budgets. Cut that to 10% and reinvest in what matters. Build more one-stop hubs where people can access housing, healthcare, job training, and legal aid all in one place. Right now, only 60,000 people got job training through CalWorks in 2023, but more than 200,000 actually needed it. And finally, let's bring in the community. Look at the Lucky Duck Foundation in San Diego. They raised $10 million privately and trained 500 homeless individuals for jobs. Now imagine if businesses statewide got tax breaks for hiring people with lived experience of homelessness. That could create 10,000 new jobs and change lives in the process. These aren't just ideas, they're blueprints for a better future. Number 10, the social safety net. Too little, too late? Let's talk about California's social safety net, the system that's supposed to catch people before they fall or help them climb back up when they do. On paper, it's one of the most generous in the country, but in practice, it's overwhelmed, underfunded, and full of gaps. Start with Medi-Cal California's public health insurance program. It now covers around 15 million low-income residents. That's nearly 40% of the state's population. In recent years, it's expanded beyond basic medical care to include mental health support and short-term housing. In 2023, about 30,000 homeless individuals received care through medical. But here's the problem. The actual need is closer to 990,000. That's a massive gap. Then there's CalWorks, the state's cash assistance program for families. A household of 3 can receive up to $1,200 a month. It also helps with housing, and since 2021, it's kept about 50,000 families housed, but only 1 in 4 eligible households actually get this support, mostly because of strict requirements or limited funding. For single adults, the backup option is general relief, but it's barely a lifeline, around $221 a month. That's not enough to rent a room or even cover groceries for long. Worse, 60% of applications are denied, often because people lack documents like a photo ID or proof of residence, things most people experiencing homelessness simply don't have. CalFresh, California's food assistance program, reaches about 4.8 million people, giving each person an average of $250 per month for groceries. It's made a huge difference in reducing hunger. But food alone doesn't solve homelessness. So what's the deeper issue? The system is buried in red tape. The applications are long, confusing, and often require internet access or transportation just to complete. No surprise then that 50% of homeless applicants give up midway through the process. And even when they do get help, it's often not enough to meet the reality of today's housing costs. The programs are trying, but they're stuck playing catch-up in a crisis that keeps moving faster. If California wants real impact, it needs to make the safety net easier to access, stronger in support, and faster in response. Because in the fight against homelessness, slow help is no help at all. Number 11. Maria's story. When life unravels. Let me tell you a true story, one that could happen to anyone. Maria used to be a preschool teacher in Los Angeles. She loved her job, made around $55,000 a year, and lived in a modest apartment near South LA. Her life was stable, nothing fancy, but steady. Then the pandemic hit. When schools shut down in 2020, Maria was let go. At first, she thought it would just be temporary, but months passed and the job never came back. Isolated and anxious, she slipped into depression. To cope, she turned to prescription meds, then got hooked. By the time unemployment benefits ran out, Maria had fallen behind on rent. Her savings were gone. Eventually, she was evicted. With no family nearby, her car became home. It was cramped, but at least it had a roof and a lock. That didn't last long either. In 2022, the city towed her car for unpaid tickets, and just like that, Maria found herself on the streets, alone, scared and sleeping in Skid Row. She got by on general relief, just $221 a month. That's barely enough for food, let alone shelter in a city like LA. In 2023, a bit of hope came through Project Homekey. Maria was placed in a converted motel room, her first private space in over a year. But the help stopped there. No mental health counseling, no addiction support, no real path forward. Though now, Maria's stuck, not on the sidewalk, but not out of crisis either. Her story is a hard reminder that homelessness isn't always about laziness or bad choices. Sometimes, it's about a series of blows, job loss, illness, no support, until the bottom drops out. And here's the thing, Maria's not alone. There are tens of thousands just like her in Los Angeles, people who had careers, homes, and plans until life unraveled. Programs like Project Homekey can save lives, but without the full wraparound care, mental health, addiction treatment, job support, it's like giving someone a life raft without a paddle. Because escaping homelessness isn't just about having four walls, it's about having a way back. And right now, that path is still far too narrow. Maria's story deserves to be told, not just to move us, but to move us to act. So what's really behind California's homelessness crisis? It's not just one problem, it's a perfect storm. Sky-high rents, a deep shortage of affordable housing, untreated mental illness and addiction, and a safety net that too often fails to catch people before they fall. Yes, the state has invested billions, more than $37 billion since 2018, but the results have been uneven. Programs often work in silos, and money doesn't always reach those who need it most. If there's one thing this journey has shown us, it's that we need a better path forward, a smarter, more connected approach. One that builds more affordable homes, ties housing to real treatment, prevents homelessness before it starts, and invites communities to be part of the solution, not just the audience. Because this isn't just a housing issue, it's a human issue. People like Maria and Dick remind us that homelessness can happen to anyone. And if we truly want to change the story, we need more than short-term fixes. We need long-term vision rooted in dignity, care. So here's the question we leave with you. If you had to choose, would you prioritize building homes or expanding mental health care? There's no easy answer, but asking the right questions is where real change begins. Thanks for exploring this powerful and complex journey with us. If this story made you pause, made you think, or opened your eyes just a little wider, we'd love to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments, give the video a like if it resonated with you, and consider subscribing to NVL Travel Documentary for more untold stories from the road, the raw, the real, and everything in between. Because sometimes, the heart of a place isn't in the landmarks, it's in the people fighting to survive just beyond the frame.